Hi, everyone. I'm Dan Goodstein. I head up the Institute for Robotic Process Automation and Artificial Intelligence. We are a professional association for RPA and AI, helping members with industry education, networking, and advice. We've assembled a panel today. We want to talk about going beyond RPA and the shift to intelligent automation. And we've assembled some of the top thought leaders in the space to walk you through the discussion. Before I introduce the panelists, I want to introduce to you my co-moderator for today. Josh Bresler is the partner at THL Partners. Josh?
Thanks, Dan. Thanks for having me today, and happy to be helping host this panel. I'm a managing director at THL Partners in our technology and business solutions vertical. We are a Boston-based private equity firm investing in middle market growth companies, and we have a new fund dedicated to the automation sector. Thanks, Dan.
Thank you, Josh. So let me go to you first as far as introductions. Gene Chow. Go ahead, Gene.
Hey, folks. As Dan and Josh mentioned, thanks for having me. I'm Gene Chow. I lead the cognitive process automation and intelligent workflows business for IBM. And thank you for having me.
Thanks, Gene. Mike?
Hey, good morning, gentlemen. This is Mike Engel. I'm the intelligent automation leader within PwC Labs. So my team is responsible for automating our core services as well as innovation and commercialization of some of the technologies we're building in the firm.
Thanks, Mike. Anupam, hello.
Hello, everyone. My name is Anupam Gupta. I'm a partner with Avasant, and I lead our digital transformation practice where we work with Global 1000 enterprises, helping them leverage the power of digital technologies to transform their business.
Sounds good, gentlemen. So let's just jump in and let's start at the beginning. Gene, let me go to you first, and I'd like to ask each of the panelists kind of your definition of intelligent automation. You know, we get into these acronyms sometimes as an industry, and you ask 3 different people, you get 4 different answers. So I'm curious as to how you're describing this to your clients, Gene.
Yeah, it's a great question, Dan. I mean, and it's funny, right? We those of us who have kids, there's like, you know, when I had the kids growing up, there was a bad word jar in the middle of the table when they were saying bad things. And not that these words are bad, but there are big phrases in our industry: platform, intelligent automation, AI, cloud, right? These are very big terms. So I'm glad you asked this question. I think in order for us to answer this succinctly, we need to figure out what I call the 3 dimensions of automation, right? One is physical. We all know the physical, whether it's the transmission in your car or robotic arms on the floor, shop floors. So there's a physical dimension. There's a cognitive dimension, what we would deem as thought workers, your accountancies, your people who are using their brains more than physically adapted. And then the third dimension is what I'll call an integrated workflow perspective, where humans and machines come together. They coexist. So when we start thinking about intelligent automation, the fundamental question is, how autonomous is the work that's being conducted across those 1 or 3 dimensions, okay? And the intelligence aspect for us is how we're using how we're migrating from static processes, static ways of working, to dynamic ones with the software elements, with the AI elements. How autonomous are they? So it's not just following rules engines, you know, A, B, C, 1, 2, 3. How non-deterministic, how dynamic is that? So whether that's an accountant, whether that's a labor worker, whether that's someone doing materials management. So we have to look at it from a workflow perspective, not a task perspective. That makes sense, Dan?
Mike?
Gene, that was really good. I will just add to this. I just got off a conversation with one of our clients about this very topic, and he added to your definition by saying it's less about technology for them and more about cultural change. How do I, kind of upskill and digitize my workforce, my entire enterprise, and how do I ensure adoption of these technologies? Certainly, it's about the convergence of these technologies, whether it's RPA and BPM, and as you were talking about. But how do I change the culture of my company to really adopt? It's part of the intelligent part, right?
Anupam, anything you would add to that definition?
No, my esteemed colleagues have already painted the intelligent automation canvas. But the way I look at it, RPA by itself is like fundamental building blocks for digital operations. They perform certain tasks repetitively based on certain business rules. But as you go higher and higher up the value chain, tasks get more complicated, more complex decision making. And that's where AI, cognitive machine learning comes in, because if you add that, then these tasks can handle unstructured data and make these judgmental decisions that do not require a physical worker. So adding the two together really results in intelligent automation, which allows companies to automate more of their core and front-end tasks.
Yeah, because I was going to ask you, Anupam, why do you see kind of the pure play RPA users, seeking out intelligent automation, right? So, and I'll start with you. I'll let you go first this time. Any other reasons? What are some of the key levers that you're seeing as far as this shift go?
Well, again, like with many new class of software, right? RPA burst onto the scene as this huge, this magic wand that could help reduce operating costs by 30–40%, right? And that was a great, thrust for the popularity of RPA. But what's happened in the last 2–3 years is the value of RPA has actually now gone up the enterprise and is a lot more strategic. And it became very evident during the current pandemic, where we saw that RPA has now become an imperative. Now, many people may not know that when the lockdowns happened and airlines had to handle with a flood of cancellation and changes coming in from users, guess what? They use RPA to handle up to 80% of that workload, up to 4,000 cancellations a day being processed by robotic processes, right? So RPA has really now become that fundamental building block for digital operations. And every company today needs to think in those terms so that they enable the business resiliency as you deal with crisis and you deal with other challenges to your business.
Mike, what say you? Is it a magic wand or no?
I love magic wand. I actually wrote that down. Thanks, Anupam. It is maybe it's the start of a magic wand, but I think really the movement to intelligent automation is a recognition that we've got to go broader in terms of the process we're automating and not just be focused on tasks. Also, this realization that there's still going to be humans in the loop, right? To what Gene was talking about earlier with, kind of the workflow solutions. It's become, recognized as being very important. And then the other part of it is that if we really want to start to move towards the cognitive and AI capabilities, we have to recognize that, we need data, right? It's not just about the process and automating it, but we need to bring data into the discussion. So I think those are some of the reasons that that's happening.
Gene, how about before I hand it to Josh for the next question, anything you would add from the standpoint of just from a technology provider standpoint?
Yeah, there's a lot in there, right? And I love what both Michael and Anupam had said, and I'll say it in a slightly different way, is that, when we talk about AI in particular, and there's a broad structure there, right? AI needs a marriage. It needs a partner in crime. By itself, it's okay and it's interesting, but how Michael describes the humans in the loop, right? When we describe an intelligent workflow or intelligent automation, it's the marriage of what people are doing, what the systems are now capable of doing, and now we have the introduction of algorithms, right? Those all three parts have to coexist together, sort of rooted by the availability of data. And data is another one of those big broad words, right? Data comes in all sorts of altitudes. You need an information architecture to be able to leverage that data into consumable solutions. So when you say why are most RPA users looking for an intelligent automation, it's bidirectional. It's they need to couple that capability with something, whether it's a workflow definition, a process guidebook, and or data to become that intelligent aspect of it. Now, AI is a different beast altogether, right? We could probably have another discussion on it, but we see four distinctive parts of AI. One is the systems of engagement, how humans interact with systems. Think about chatbots and buying assistants. The second one is traditional machine learning. We all need to know what is an episodic versus a semantic memory. hey, I know what Josh is doing here right now. Oh, and I know who he is, and he's been here before. Those are very important aspects of machine learning. Third one, fairly new, is reasoning. What are the inferences of the data that you're collecting? Raw data by itself is, like I said, interesting, but not usable. And then the last one where RPA fits in, I'll use a very technical term, is the doing of AI. What are the activities and task aspects of it, right? So when quote unquote, they're looking for intelligent automation, what they're doing is finding their seat as the root across that structure. So what Anupam and Michael said is spot on.
Hey, Gene, if I may, are you seeing kind of a shift in the center, right? So we another overused term, orchestration, but when we talk about process orchestrating, right, it feels like BPM or workflow technology is kind of finding its way to the center, where RPA is really a feature of something.
Yeah, that is it's a great way to put it. It's the center of gravity almost across all sectors right now, especially the ones that are now dealing in complex business models. And think about telcos, right? Telcos are at the same time a network provider, a consumer products company, and in many cases a credit or lender like a bank. So going across those things requires a center or a gravity around those process designs and architectures. And the fun part about this now, your traditional BPM, your traditional swim lane approaches are dead and gone. If you look at an autonomous or a highly automated process, it looks like a spaghetti chart, right? It looks like a bowl of spaghetti, whereas before you'd have order to cash, vertical swim lanes, or record to report. Those things still exist, but the availability and ability to do different hops across different swim lanes is like ruling the roost right now. So that's a great question, Michael.
Right. So you're saying we're moving from the kind of a linear process view to more of maybe a workforce view or a persona, even, if we want to use that word.
Absolutely. The term our technical folks use is we've gone from deterministic to non-deterministic. And once you go to non-deterministic, there's no rote path, right? It's not A plus B equals C now. Now it's, hey, we can jump to D, or hey, what about 1, 2, and 3? It's like, oh,
right.
So now those variables change, right?
Yeah, perfect.
Thanks, Gene. Maybe a question for the group I had as an investor and an owner of businesses. Where do folks see the low-hanging fruit for intelligent automation? Where should we be looking? The use cases, or maybe it's the industry verticals. That'd be great to hear a little bit on that. And maybe Gene, I'll just start with you.
Sure. What we've done is we've classified everything we do as IBM services for our clients and for ourselves. And by the way, we consume this as customer zero is IBM itself. We took a look at 5 classifications. One is, where is the routine, mundane, highly repetitive aspects that also have predictive systems environments? You can create those automation objects. RPA and swivel chair technologies slam dunk in there, Josh. Just make sure we can apply those rules engines in there. It's probably a couple of years old where I think a lot of people have gone there. The next phase up is now, okay, what are we learning from those routines? Why are they routines? Can we change those things? So now we're getting more into what I'll call departmental work that has a little bit more nuances. And those things can be either started by a human being or completed by a human being, but there's machines or algorithms in between. What we want to get to, and I'll fast forward, the big chapter we're looking at is, can we make everything straight through processing in field? And that's everything from your accountant back office to managing cash, to your inventory, to providing consulting research, right? Those are the types of things. So we've built this scale of how to adopt and where, but it's still rooted in the technical environment, what kind of standards you've set for your workflow design. And then, as Michael said eloquently before, the human in the loop aspect is incredibly critical because we still have to adopt it. We're not in an artificial general intelligence world where it stands by itself. You need a spark, and that's us. Hopefully that makes sense, Josh.
Got it. No, that makes sense. Mike, anything you'd add where we should be looking for this low-hanging fruit, so to speak?
Yeah, well, Gene really defined it well in that kind of repetitive, standardized world. I mean, that hasn't changed much, but I think what is changing, Josh, is that there's no real epicenter from an industry perspective. You mentioned industry is kind of one of the things in your question, and I think it's everywhere now, right? It's no longer just the epicenter of BPO providers and financial services firms. It's in every industry. But what's interesting about it, I think, is that it's gone from just kind of this task automation, let's just bang these things out as quickly as possible, to being more focused on real business change, real transformation. How do I change my entire workflow associated with claims processing or whatever it might be? So I think that's an interesting change right now. Not that it's low-hanging fruit, but it certainly is a target area.
Got it. Anupam?
To Gene and Mike, I agree that intelligent automation has now become a necessity. In fact, I look at it as the digital vaccine that companies need to survive through these kinds of crisis, right? Where it provides the business continuity, it enables a digital workforce, and it provides that seamless fabric on which you can then layer higher value processes. So intelligent automation today is looked upon as a really very strategic initiative, which every organization, whether it's small to large, needs to leverage so that they can compete in this coming turbulent times.
And Anupam, speaking of turbulent times, I think you've got that right. I mean, as we think about COVID specifically, and it's on everyone's mind, it's everywhere we go, how is the pandemic that we've all been experiencing around the globe impacting the deployment of intelligent automation? How is it changing demand drivers? Is it changing the types of companies that are looking at this technology? What are you seeing?
Yeah, so I think one of the, I would say, the inhibitors of what I call RPA at scale was the fact that deploying RPA and scaling and maintaining bots in an enterprise environment, it has not been that seamless as one would have expected. It really wasn't plug and play, right, as it was sold to be. So the challenge has been that the cost of deploying RPA has to go down, and it has been going down due to more sophistication in the deployment tools, more automation in the process of automating processes, right? The whole bot automation approach. And then we're also seeing that more and more companies are offering RPA as a service, where essentially you basically outsource the entire function, it's not just a pricing model, it's a deployment model. So especially in COVID, where everybody's remote, it's important to have a partner who is able to handle the deployment and the ongoing support of bots from a remote location. And I think RPA as a service is catching on due to that.
Interesting. Mike, just COVID impacts on deployment of intelligent automation. What are you seeing?
Well, obviously, we're seeing increased demand, right? And demand not just to get started, but to scale these programs. We did a survey, kind of pre-pandemic, an executive survey of our clients, and 84% of them said that they needed to scale these programs, their automation programs, and less than 10%. I've forgotten the exact number, but less than 10% actually have done that. So you can assume that in pandemic, it's even more. So I think to Anupam's point, there's all these kind of capabilities that are emerging and that sort of thing that we need to put in play. But it's also kind of how we go about our business. How do we collaborate? How do we, we don't have those 5 minutes in a hallway kind of conversations anymore. So how do we actually interact with our clients in a way where, for example, we can just document what it was that they needed in the first place, right? It's all changed. So there's a component of how that we do this work that's changing in pandemic.
No, it makes a lot of sense. I have this mental picture I use of a bunch of guys like me pounding the table for their companies to automate, and businesses not necessarily knowing what that means, right? And being pushed into this. So I think it's creating a really interesting dynamic. I don't know, Gene, if you'd agree with that, or what you're seeing out of your client base.
Yeah, very much so. There's a bit of a dichotomy, Josh, in that there's a lot more people willing to check it out, right? And and that sort of consumable model that you mentioned in terms of a app or software as a service type of engagement is pervasive right now. They've moved away from sort of lab experiments to actual functional areas, seeing where they can drop it in. But to Michael's point, the idea of plug and play is there. It's just not quite ready for that just yet. The big explosion for us has been around the concept of, though, a burstable labor model, right? The pandemic environment has created a business continuity issue where can or should people hire? And if they automate things the right way, you can actually have a software-based labor model. We call them digital workers that could augment your human staff. That's happening across a lot of the commerce-based, web-based type of companies, especially around services. So that's an incredible thing. Now, I think where the big ones are going, there's automation in every transformation discussion we're having at every client in every industry. Now, the big change for us, though, is it used to be a technology or IT discussion. We literally have CEOs and board of directors now saying this has to be part of the fabric of this company now because of business resiliency, because of business continuity. We want to be prepared for whatever happens next, right? How ready is this stuff? Should I create a lab? Should I create a center of excellence? So it's created a strategic twist as well.
Yeah. Thank you.
I agree with that, Gina. You think about, this is becoming board level discussion for sure. So it is in large part about how do we scale, but also how do we govern? We're trying to consume and understand what the workforce of the future is going to look like, right? Just generally, how much remote versus in on-premise and all of that sort of thing. So kind of figuring out how we're going to govern this model, how we're going to measure the output. Look, if I'm creating capacity in my workforce, that's great, but what am I doing with that capacity? And what will I do with it in the future is an important question to answer.
Yep. And if I can add on to that, Josh, just one more thing. I don't want to speak for all service integrators or providers, but I suspect that this is happening. And Anupam, I would love your insight here. The economics of automation is at a pivot point. Let's take a look at, just to pick on the traditional labor-based, labor arb, BPO type of models. The cost baseline for these things as they adopt automation, and it's being driven from the client side, right, is a very dramatic shift downwards. Unit-based pricing is reducing, but it's interesting because what's not happening is the reflection of, or the mirror image of, now I'm going to charge you for a bot. I'm going to remove the resource unit of a human being and the work's still getting done. Therefore, your cost will come down. But there has to be a bit of an uplift in terms of, hey, there's a software-based script in there. There's an AI script in there. Now something other than the human hands is doing your work. So the commercial models, I think, are still, the jury's still out. That will drive what's on-premise, what's a business process or software as a service, what's an outsourced model. And I don't think we can amplify enough the things that Michael was saying, in that the control mechanisms or the instrumentation to make sure your automations are working well, what the impact to your infrastructure or cloud environments are, what are the rules engines or anomalies that happen when they fail. Those are very critical aspects that are becoming lessons learned for the biggest companies and early adopters. Lots of RPA and automation in the environment, and they only know it's broken when it breaks. They don't know that, hey, it might be working seamlessly from a software runtime perspective, but something odd is going on. You won't know unless you have a control tower type of approach.
Yeah,
that's also a good point. I'm sorry, Anupam. I was just going to point out that we expect, just like every other big thing that happens, whether it's 9/11 or a pandemic, there's going to be a lot of organizational change that comes out of this. And so how do we balance the human versus digital workforce, I think, is going to be a question we need to help our clients with as well.
Yeah, and I think the reality is that, in the earlier days, you're talking about deploying bots, and the cost of a bot itself was not significant, right? It was the deployment. The cost of the license was not significant. The deployment costs a lot more. But as you started deploying more factories and of bots, and you got the economies of scale, you realize now you also need orchestration engine. You need process mining. A lot of the tool companies have been, of course, embedding these functionalities into their software suite, and now you're able to get that. So the overall cost of automation has been dropping, while the value of use cases has been rising as you get into more and more complex processes. And the use cases now also deal with things like I just mentioned earlier, where you are helping an organization through the cyclical ups and downs, right? You're helping them with compliance. You're helping them with protecting the enterprise as workers work remotely. So the cost of that becomes a lot, in terms of the ROI, a lot more relevant. And hence you're seeing now intelligent automation become a must-have in every toolkit.
So the last question I wanted to ask you guys, that's a great segue, Anupam. For someone watching this saying, okay, I think I've got the definition down. I think I understand some of the low-hanging fruit and some of the opportunities out there. Now I got to look at the vendorscape, right? And despite what some of the analysts will have you believe, not all these companies fit into a quadrant or in a wave or in a box, right? So how do you begin to evaluate the providers that are out there, the solutions, the offerings that are out there, and map them to the what you're trying to accomplish?
Right. So again, the vendor landscape has kind of grown, and then it's beginning to contract as a lot of consolidation and acquisitions happen. IBM itself has done an acquisition, and most of the other software players are acquiring RPA companies. And eventually, we believe that this is going to be part of the enterprise ERP suite, right? So when you're looking to select an RPA player, there are many factors one has to look for beyond just the cost and the total cost, of deploying it. You have to look at the fit with the organization. So if you're a large enterprise, if you're in let's say a financial services industry, you want to go for a platform that is robust and highly scalable, kind of like what Blue Prism has traditionally been. If you're looking more for ease of deployment and the ability to diversify the use cases, maybe you want to go for a more agile platform like you have Path. So you're looking at these different parameters as well as the product roadmap. We talked about the fact that most of these tools companies are bundling these different modules and are expanding their offerings. So one has to also look at what the future product roadmap of that company looks like, so that you're aligned with the company that is going to help elevate the relevance and provide a better, more seamless platform for intelligent automation in the coming years.
Mike,
it's interesting.
Agree, disagree?
You think of, yeah, no, I was just sorry to add into that. It's interesting to see, kind of this convergence of technologies into platforms. It's emerging in a sense, but not in another, right? It's the bundling, as you say, where RPA becomes ubiquitous, and you don't really have to think about that. What I wonder about is really, are companies taking stock in what they already have, right? Particularly as Gene was talking about before, when we bring data together with the process automation, there's already something going on in these organizations around data, for sure. And how do those things converge, and how does the thought converge around it? So my point is that you really have to start thinking about identifying technologies that fill gaps, right? You have some, you probably already in RPA if you're getting started. So how do you fill the gaps that exist with other technologies?
Gene, you're in the process of solutioning a few of these right now, I assume, right? So how about from the provider perspective?
Yeah, for sure. A couple of things both my colleagues said make a lot of sense and are spot on. Anupam, describes. He said something that I don't want to gloss over. A starting point, regardless of the technology brand, should and now be around the process mining and visualization space. Let's not discount that, because that's going to be your collection point of where these technologies can reside and coexist with your human capital and other investments like your ERPs. There are, however, sort of the and to that is that world is ever changing, not only because process and data visualization is ruling the roost, but the ability to quote unquote codify an RPA is changing. If you look at what a Microsoft is doing with Power Platform, they're moving into a low code and no code environment. It's a ways off, but that's going to be AI developing AI, right? That's going to be that dynamic aspect of automation development. That I don't want to go down a rat hole there, but the course selection, to your point, Dan, will be around number one, what is the technical debt or technology debt you have in your environment? Are you going to be able to go seamlessly put any of the RPA brands in your environment without overhauling certain source code level things, right? That technical debt or technical DNA is almost always a showstopper, regardless of the type of RPA. Now, they are similar in terms of source code, but they're different in terms of their process lineage and DNA. So to Anupam's point, find the ones that have experience. All of them are good at IT services. Not all of them are good in treasury and cash management or in inventory management. There's going to be a process DNA involved. And I really like what Michael continues to say as well in terms of there is a massive digital change or transformation program you have to adopt with this. The technology won't just show up and, hey, there's an easy button and we're off and going. There has to be, number one, a author and owner, if you will. There's going to be a franchise owner for automation inside your company. It can't just be, hey, chuck it over the wall to IT, they'll figure it out and we'll have stuff automated and hey, here's the dollars that we get back. It ain't that simple, right? So there's a bit more work to be done. And I'll close with this. I think we're all waiting to see what the model will be. Will the RPA community be embedded into these larger system environments like an SAP or a Workday or Salesforce? Or will they make a turn into an good unpredictable area that has some sort of new applied technology approach to it? I don't think we can predict that yet, but they're doing something right? They were able to move off the lily pad of swivel chair screen scraping and into some high quality areas. I think the jury's still out. The fight is still to be had in terms of what that technology landscape looks like. By the way, a kissing cousin in that fight is something called blockchain, right? There's a lot of back and forth on, hey, what about blockchain here versus an RPA there versus something else over here? There's still a battleground out there. So hopefully that makes sense, Dan.
Great discussion. Great discussion. Anupam, final thoughts?
Yeah, I think to add to Gene's points, really, I mean, the clients that we're seeing are really on this journey of creating digital operations. And RPA and intelligent automation now is becoming part of that journey. Many of them are re-platforming, and as they re-platform the entire function, bring on board the right technology platform, they're looking at automation as closing the process gap so they can reimagine the whole workflow, make it more streamlined, make it less people dependent, as we said, get human out of the loop, but at the same time, have the human be involved in those critical decision points, right? So RPA and intelligent automation really is going to be that essential ingredient in any enterprise replatforming and digital operations initiative in the future.
Gentlemen, I want to thank you for your time. Gene, Mike, Anupam, thanks for being here. To my co-host here, Josh, really appreciate it. To be continued. I think if you're like me, I feel like we're just getting started. So we'll have to schedule part 2. But in the meantime, thanks again. And thanks everyone for watching. Take care, everybody.
Absolutely.
Thanks,
Take care,
everyone.
everyone. Thank you.
Bye.